get ready before life happens. The podcast helping you navigate life's what ifs.
The future of financial planning is about asking better questions rather than having all the answers. Welcome to Get Ready Before Life Happens. I'm joined today by Colleen Bowler. Colleen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. You're doing some really cool things. So to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story and how did it lead you to creating the passport package?
Oh, goodness, that's a long story that I'll try to make quick. Origin story in the sense of my upbringing, which habits are such a big thing in changing, which we were talking about change makers earlier. I grew up in this big family, 6 kids. My mom had this abundance mindset. It was one that there was always another person at the table. Someone is always invited. The table gets bigger, even though we had powdered skim milk and day-old bread from the Wonder Bread store. But I didn't actually realize that we were poor until my dad died when I was 16, and we had $187 in the bank. So that meant no college funds, no plan actually, and the impact on families when there is absolutely no planning is pretty huge. And we got to live through that. And luckily, my mother also taught us, and father, grit and perseverance and determination. And she started her own company because she needed to be flexible in all these things. My mom became an entrepreneur after being a nurse. So we learned to just make it happen. And so that happened to me too when I was in the middle of a divorce. Was in the middle of changing jobs and found out the job that I thought I had wasn't there. And so I'm in the middle of a divorce. I've got a sick 3-year-old, no income, given all the debt because I was the one who did have a job. I didn't create the debt, but I was given it. And somebody said, "Hey, Colleen, you're good at math. Why don't you do this thing called financial planning?" And I did. I made $14,000 the first year. And then through grit and perseverance and determination and a lot of support, when I sold my firm in 2020, I was in the top 1%, 7+ figures, a fabulous firm, and I wanted to give back. I wanted to help others learn easier or, simpler than what I did, because it was a lot of school of hard knocks, as you can imagine, Tony, in the beginning of my career. And also, there's only 15% women when I started in the industry. Now there's only like 17%. We haven't done very well on that thing. We need to be a change maker in that part. But I really didn't have any guides or training on the human side. There was a whole lot on the financial side. There's a lot of instruments that you could use, but how could I make asking questions about someone else's future, which is what I learned really when we can weave that together with their finances, then we have a sticky relationship and we can also help them. Right. So that's how the passport package started. Somebody, Jeannie Hurlburt, PhD, much smarter than me, knew how to create assessments. I knew how the questions, and advisors now are using them, financial advisors, with quick 5-minute assessments with prospects or with clients in their annual reviews. How's that for us?
That is great. And, I appreciate you sharing the journey I call it the origin story because I think that so many people, when you ask them their bio, and you go through the bio, it's not very interesting. But when you hear
Yeah.
somebody's story, is it shows that you can, change your circumstances, as you said, through grit and perseverance, and that it is possible. And I think the story, especially as you point out, is I think for women to succeed in financial services can be extremely difficult. There's so many things. I mean, for people who watch and listen to the podcast, they've heard me have a lot of guests on who've discussed that. Um, so I think that's such an important conversation. And the thing that I'm hearing about women entering financial services is that a lot of them are going into financial coaching and
Yeah.
financial therapy rather than financial planning. And so I think that's where some of the growth is. And I've had on a lot of financial planners who have become financial planners. They're CFPs,
Yeah.
but they're coaching. So I don't know if you've run into
Mhm.
CFPs
Yes.
who've made that transition.
They've made that transition. And I do believe they make that transition because they're doing it so much. If any financial advisor doesn't believe they're also not a therapist, a coach, a cheerleader, they've missed the whole mark of what a really good financial advisor brings to the conversation. The financial side, especially with all of AI and the ease of doing investment allocation or figuring out what life insurance policy is really the best for this person, et cetera, that's become so much easier. So the advisor can actually spend more time on the human side, which is really, once again, that's what makes the relationship sticky. That's what makes it that you really bring a lot of value to that relationship.
And I think that's so important because, with the age of AI, this is something that, we've talked about a lot is like,
Yeah.
okay, which advisors are going to succeed? Microsoft did a study that financial advising is a industry that is going to have a huge amount of attrition due to AI. And I think it's because, as you point out, the
Mhm.
financial planners who are the ones who are, heavily focused on building portfolios and all those things, AI can do the majority of that work now. Now, not always very well, and it's prone to
Right.
hallucinations. However, it's getting there and it will be there very quickly. So, as you point out, I'm a huge believer that the human side. I did want to touch on one thing because I do remember
Sure.
that powdered milk, and there is nothing yuckier than that powdered
Oh,
milk.
it's disgusting, especially if it's not made the night before. And we rotated jobs, and it was always somebody's job to make it the night before. And it was 4 gallons of powdered skim milk. Oh, man. And if they didn't make it that night before, the next day, it was disgusting to have to drink it.
Yeah. So for anybody out there listening and you've had powdered milk, you know what we're talking about. So, but fortunately, I don't even know if they still make it.
I saw it on a shelf. I saw it on a shelf. Yeah. I had nightmares but when I walked by.
So anyway, so I did take a detour there. Is
Okay, good.
so thanks everybody for bearing with us. So one of the things that you talked about is asking questions, and for me,
Mhm.
after all this time, I believe the core thing that we can do to help people with their money is to empower them to be able to ask questions. Is in your mind, why is asking questions so powerful? Because it sounds like it's very central to your work as well.
Yeah, it is very central to the assessments that our clients, the advisors, financial advisors give their prospects and clients. Because I think the further and further along you go in your career, the more and more you know, and the more and more you think you know what Tony should be doing in his life. Oh, you see this list of stuff. But until you ask questions, you really don't know. And so our assessments cover 8 mindsets about where they are now and where they want to be in the future. And I'll give one example. One advisor who is using our assessments with a high net worth client thought for sure they would be very focused on philanthropy. And when they looked at the assessments, it's a 1 to 12, they were like a 6 on purpose. That wasn't where they were at, right? It is where the advisor thought they were at, but it's not where they were at. What's more important to them was longevity. Like, what happens if something happens to me? And he was thinking, why would they be concerned about that? They know they have so much money. But he didn't ask the question. And having the assessment ask the question in the privacy of their own home, that allowed them to. So whether you use the assessments or it's just asking the questions, it is about the client's future and where they want to go, not about where you think they should go. Like, what is it that is most important to them? This is also, Tony, why I don't think AI, in the sense of a good advisor, the human side. We say keep it simple, keep it human. I have a blended family. I went through a divorce. I met my current husband when my son was in college. So I was a single mom the whole time I built my business. His first wife had passed away. He's got 3 kids. We were just on the phone last week with our financial advisor, because even though I am one, having someone ask us the questions makes all the difference. It's that partnership of someone that can see outside of the little box that is our life, or the big box that is our life. They can see around the corner. They've had experience with other people in your situation. So by asking the questions, they get such richness in how they really can support you.
Yeah, that resonates so much. I was just taking a couple notes. Is we tend to forget that it really is about where the client wants to go, not where you think they want to go. And that's a trap that's so easy to fall into because we get excited about planning technique. And I know
Yes.
early on you even get excited about certain products, and and you sort of start to think, like, if you have a hammer, every problem is a nail. And
Mm-hmm.
and you tend to it's an easy trap to fall into as an advisor, is to start thinking about what you think the client should do rather than thinking about where the client wants to go. And as you point out, the only way to know is to ask some questions, and and really to dig deep. So before we move on, do you want to share about what the passport package is, since we're talking about it?
Oh, sure. Thank you, Tony. It is 2 simple assessments, one for ages 45 and under who are accumulating, and one for 46 and above who are in that walk away. No one that I ever worked with wanted to retire, unless it is retire from what you don't love to do, right? You want to go to something, right? You want to walk away towards something. And maybe it is walk away to only certain parts of what you're doing right now. Maybe it is walk away to a volunteer position. Maybe it is walk away to working with grandkids, whatever that walk away is. So there's 2 assessments, and each one covers 8 mindsets, 8 core mindsets. Where are you now on a scale of 1 to 12? And where do you want to be in your future on a scale of 1 to 12? And you can see with each one of those mindsets, if somebody rates themselves 8 right now in one of the mindsets and they want to be a 12, and another one they're an 8, but they want to be an 8, where they really want to be is with the 12. And that's where the conversation needs to start, with where they want to go in their future. Same thing with annual reviews. It's funny, Tony, I just finished my 30 hours of CFPCE, and you're supposed to, as a CFP, do both quantitative and qualitative review every year, minimum every year. And we all know the return on investment. We all have all the financial things, but where do we show them the progress or backsliding of where they are on the human side, on that personal side? This is a way that they can do it. They take these assessments every year, quick 5 minutes in their own home. They get to sit with it and breathe with it. During one of the mindsets is wellness. During COVID, weight gain was 29 pounds on average, right? Wellness
Wow.
numbers came down. Imagine that, right? One of the, and maybe for your change maker listeners, one of the biggest aha moments for me as a female, longevity mindset is about who's going to take care of us if something happens to us. And interesting because the women tend to be the ones taking care of the older generation and the younger generation. That number, they are much, they want to know what's going to happen to them. Men aren't as concerned about it. So, as an advisor, that's something for me to know, right? That's something that's important in that conversation if that's where they are. So, just questions, all questions.
Yeah, well, I think that's really interesting is, as you talk about longevity and the differences between men and women, there are differences. I mean, we can't stereotype and say every woman is
No.
thinking about this or every man, but that overall we do see some trends is recently I completed the Impact Philanthropic Advisor, and that
Mm,
was a huge part of the curriculum was about how women think differently
yeah.
about philanthropy and how the philanthropic advisory community needs to shift to understand that. And it was interesting
Yeah.
is because out of my cohort, I was the only male. So
Oh,
that
that's
said
interesting.
something
Oh,
about
that's
who's
interesting.
interested.
Yeah.
It-
The other thing, you know, I sold my firm in 2020, but I was in practice for, I don't know, 28 years. In every couple that we work with, there's always a quieter voice in the conversation. There always is. One is always leading the conversation. And how do we bring that quieter voice out? And the assessments is one way because each partner answers the assessment themselves, and then the advisor can go through it with them. I think that's really important for all of us, whether we use the assessments or not, to ask questions. I used to say, okay, Tony, you're the one who always answers first. You be quiet. I'm going to ask the question, right? I would just make it a game to ask the question to the quieter voice first. And because the other one I was going to hear from, right? We just, right now, I think the average is 70%, somewhere around there, of widows leave their current advisor. I just want to take a deep breath on that one. My best friend just lost her husband a couple years ago, 4 different advisors. All 4 of them have been fired because no one had listened to her. They had always listened to him, right? And why does somebody want to stay? But it is the it is such a painful time. And I lived it with my mother. We had no assets, so that wasn't an issue. But it's such a painful time. None of those decisions should be having to be made right away, right? And that a widow doesn't feel in partnership. And then the other number is 84% of the next gen is leaving the current advisor. So, how are those questions in the conversation with the parent not including the next generation? So, we've got a lot of work as an industry in those big numbers.
Yeah, and I've heard even bigger numbers on the percentage of widows. So I guess probably depends on the study, and that's
Yeah.
not really important.
It's
So
sad. No, but it's sad,
yeah,
isn't it? Yeah.
it is, and it says a lot about listening to both partners, and I think that's something. As you point out, it's easy to listen and have a conversation with the person who is louder. It's a squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
They're talking, and as an advisor, you're working for both partners, hopefully. And so, listening to both partners is very important. Um,
I, I think, Tony, if I could say one thing, when you talk about your audience of change makers and financial fluency, um, that's one thing that everybody could pay attention to no matter what they're doing in their life, right? Listening to the voices in the conversation and making sure whatever conversation they're in, the quieter voices get listened to.
yeah,
And making sure there's a path, whether it is everybody asks the question around the table, or you ask the quieter voice first. I mean, it is, we all know we all know that it happens. It's what can we do to break that habit? It's just a habit. That's all it is. We just need to break it.
definitely, definitely. And, and as you point out, I think the other part that's even something else that advisors really need to pay attention to as well is that next generation, and
Yeah.
not engaging the next generation. For me, that always really that puzzled me as much as not talking to both partners. um, is I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I worked with a lot of same-sex partners, so that's why I keep
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
partners.
Yes.
um,
Yes. Absolutely.
so, and that same holds true, because as you said, that's listening to both voices, because no matter, what relationship, there is always that more engaged, louder voice.
Yeah.
So,
It
do you
doesn't,
have any? Oh, sorry.
pardon, I'm sorry, Tony. It doesn't change. And yes, same sex, you know, heterosexual, two sisters in a room, four brothers in a room. There's always, right? So it is paying attention in those group conversations. Absolutely.
I love that. Pay attention in group conversations, because it can be hard, and it's a muscle that you have to build, where you're consciously engaging everybody in the conversation. And that is a leadership skill as well,
Yeah.
is making sure that you're a leader, and even in your own firm, is to
Yes. I was just,
listen to all your
mhm.
employees, because I have had on so many female financial planners who've left their financial planning firm to found their own, and almost always their financial planning firms are all women, or pretty close to all women.
Yeah.
And so, that is a trend also that I've seen.
Yeah, it is. And there's always people on your team. I've had big team. There's always people on your team that are quieter than others, or don't think their opinion. They haven't been here long enough, which is actually a good reason to listen to them, because they'll see things that we wouldn't necessarily see. They're very, very important. Um, yeah. Mhm.
So, yeah, so that's really important. So, do you have any tips to engage the quieter voice in the room? What tips do you give people to actually start doing that?
As I said, the question, it's always in questions, and it is a asking the quieter voice first, and making a joke saying, okay, you're the one who's always talking. Just I tend to make a joke, however you do that. In a team, it's the same question going around the room to everyone, right? And if someone on your team is not, I mean, some people don't like to talk in public. So it is sometimes with our teams, ahead of a meeting. We do it, every quarter, every year. We do it with our team now. What worked last month? This is something we learned from Strategic Coach. What worked last month? What didn't work last month? What do we need to put in place for next month for the team and for you individually? So that is a way that everybody can do it ahead of time, because some people, Tony, you're really good thinking on your feet, right? But there are some people that need time to digest the question and put things in order, right? So paying attention to their style as well. For the next gen of clients, I think getting them in the room as soon as possible with the parents. Most of our clients did not want to tell their adult kids exact amount of money that they had, but going through the conversation about what will happen at somebody's passing, how the things are in place, what we know about, what questions they have, what is it about your own planning that you really like? Do you have questions on your own planning? And sometimes those are okay to be in front of the parents, and sometimes they want those questions in a different meeting, which is great. That's when that you've got them as a client, because they want to have a meeting with you separate than their parents. And we always had younger advisors with that next gen, because, I'm in the grandparent phase. I'm talking about grandkids, and the next gen is talking about new babies. And having a young advisor that is also talking about new babies, or is also talking about new things with work or something like that, is really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is, that the advisor should sort of not necessarily match up, but that
Yeah.
there is something to be said. People like working with people who are somewhat like themselves, and, being in a different phase of life is something that's a little bit different. However, the main thing you say that I think is a super important message is it's all about communication,
Yes.
is getting them in the room, having a conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, you don't need to have the parents talk about the exact numbers. That's not the important part of the conversation. Knowing that an account exists perhaps at a certain institution is important, or understanding why the parents have made certain decisions. That's
Yep.
the important fact, not the details. The account balances don't matter. Um,
Yeah, and it's details. You, as the advisor, can help take a lot of the pressure off of the family in knowing who's going to be the executor, who would be this, who would be this, where are the passwords, those things that are critical at a time when someone, is in the hospital or is not able to do it. Who has power of attorney? Who has power of health care? Those things, no matter what age, are really, really important to have. And no matter what the structure is in the family.
yeah, that is so important, is to know the roles. So, Colleen, to wrap up, I have what's called
Okay.
the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. These are three quick questions that I ask all of my guests. The
Okay.
first one is, what's one money myth you're trying to break?
A money myth now. I have enough.
Ah,
Um, I have this thing in the back of my head. That's a really great thought. Um, that we have enough, which we do. And there's always room to make such a difference with money. I think we have, from my background, I think I have some money things about that. That's really interesting. Yeah, that more is fine, more is great.
yeah, and I want to go back to, the topic of enough. Is I think that's something that we overlook, is, we're constantly saying, okay, accumulate, 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 save, 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 save. But, sometimes there's just enough, and, the client can switch over to their walk away. phase
Yeah.
of life because they have enough, and that's different for everyone. And as you also said about making a difference with your money, is you can have an impact with your money, both with your values and what you
Mhm.
support. And so I think that's such great advice, is to think about the difference you can make with your money. And Mackenzie Scott, Jeff Bezos' former wife, is
Yes.
the perfect example. Is she's
Wow.
giving away just an incredible amount of
Wow.
money, but having just such a huge positive impact on so many organizations, uh, that,
And
it's incredible.
a lot of it had to do with people who gave to her at a time when she didn't have anything, right? So, yeah, it is. It, what a role model.
She is. I mean, she's a role model for impact giving. So,
Yeah.
Colleen, let's get out the time machine for a minute. If you could go back in time, knowing what you know now about money, what advice would you give your younger self?
Um, that money is a habit. Money is a habit. I've worked with um, a couple lottery winners and stepped left from a couple lottery winners. And what I learned then was if you have the habit of spending more than you make, it doesn't matter how much of a lottery you win, like $60 million, it's still gone. If you have a habit of saving, you'll have it. You'll have that money, right? It doesn't matter how much it is. So I would tell myself that money is a habit.
I love that. And, I've had on guests who, work with professional athletes, and they've said the same thing. The professional athletes make an incredible amount of money, but they spend an incredible amount of money.
Yeah,
And, it's, and I've heard about, I mean, we've heard about the lottery winners who go broke. And you think, well, how could that possibly happen?
habit.
And I think, you explain it very well. So the final question is, what is
Uh-oh.
your number one tip to change the way we think about money?
I would go back to habit. It's an Aristotelian quote. People are probably tired of hearing me say this, but it is, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And that we use money, that it's a habit, that it's not about us being good or bad. It's just a habit. And we can change those habits. We can become more conscious of money. We can become more conscious of the spirituality of money. We can become more conscious of all those things that money can do. And it's a habit.
I love that. That's such great advice. So, Colleen, where can people learn more about you and the Passport Package?
Yeah, they can go to thepassportpackage.com. We'd love to talk to you. And also, I am on LinkedIn under Colleen Bowler, and C&J Innovations has a LinkedIn page as well. And we have a website, like I said, thepassportpackage.com. You could take it for yourself. There's some great action items on there to do.
Yeah, I took it, and it was very insightful. So I appreciate the resource. And for everybody watching and listening, if you do have access to the show notes, you can go to the show notes and you'll find links to the Passport Package, C&J Innovations, as well as Colleen's LinkedIn profile. So, Colleen, thanks for joining us on Get Ready Before Life Happens.
Oh, Tony, I really, really appreciate it. And to all those change makers out there that are listening to this, that are fans of Tony, thank you for listening and so appreciate all the amazing work that you are doing and being. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing as well. So um, that's fantastic. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning in to this episode of Get Ready Before Life Happens. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and to share with a friend. You can also go to my website at tonystewart.com to join the Get Ready movement and receive my newsletter and access to free resources. Because when life happens, The way you think about money matters.